Alright guys, so I figured I'd have you follow along on a day of packing. So I've got to go out and get a deer that was killed by some drop camp hunters, and I'll do a few videos along the way so you see how a day goes. Today is, roughly about 0 degrees. We got a big snowstorm and now we got a big cold snap afterwards. So my best guess is this deer is actually going to be frozen solid, so it might be kind of interesting. Alright, now after making fun of me, Comfrey and Mike are gonna help me get some horses. Alright, so we're gonna go out here and get our horses. Alright, so Steele's gonna be my ride today. Okay, Buck, you get a day off, buddy. Same with Sugar. Alright, we're gonna go over here, see what Julie thinks. What do you think, Julie? Ready to rock? Look at her, she seems to be fairly pissed. Alright, Steele's saddled and ready to go. Alright, so here's Julie. She's got her meat panniers on, ropes in there, and then I got axes in there. Alright, so we're headed out. There's Julie, Steele, and there's the ranch behind us, and hitting the road. Just cruising down the trail. There's Julie, Steele. Switch backing on up, huh, Steele? Up we go. Going through the aspen now. Alright, and then here's our buck. What do you think, Steele? What do you think, buddy? Alright guys, so we've arrived at the deer and here's the scene. There's our buck, there's our mules. And this is kind of a unique situation because these are drop camp hunters, but unfortunately they had a family emergency, and so the day they killed this buck they actually had to leave. Really nice guys, hardworking guys, so I'm glad they got a nice deer. But in this scenario I allowed them just to leave it gutted, and I told them I'd come in and quarter it. Typically on our drop camps the guys quarter them and hang them, and we just come in and pack the quarters, but in this case I don't mind helping the guys out a little bit and showing you guys a video of how I'd go about packing this in quick order. So you can see here just better, there's the buck there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape the buck, and then I'm going to show you kind of an old school method of packing a deer out. This buck happens to actually be frozen. It was sub-zero last night, so he's frozen. It's going to be a little challenging to get his cape off, but it'd be really challenging to quarter him up right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut him in half with an axe once I get him caped, and then just pack the two sides. And so I'll kind of show you guys how I go about doing that. Alright guys, so you can see I've done a backline cut here, and there's no point in being skimpy about it. Give the taxidermist plenty of cape. So I'll go back here mid-body. Okay. Go ahead and remove my front feet. Front legs, I should say. Do a little Kimura. I'm going to go ahead and start caping the leg. I've removed the lower leg here. I'm going to stay behind the leg here. I'm going to avoid the armpit section. That armpit section of the animal has thin hair, and it's very visual on most shoulder mounts. Most people are putting mounts above the line of sight, so you're going to be looking up at it. So if you cut into the armpit and the taxidermist has to sew it, it's likely that folks are going to be able to see it, and so you don't want that. So stay behind the elbow, the back of the bicep here. Okay, go behind the elbow here, go up, and then once you get up in here, then you can cut back. Okay, but you don't want to cut into the armpit section. Okay. So here I'm above the armpit of the animal here. I'm going to go back to my dorsal cut, or my back cut. And as straight as possible. I'm gonna do it in a way where you guys can see it. Saving my blade, trying to work from the inside of the flesh out, so I'm not cutting a bunch of hair with my sharp knife. Don't it? Sometimes I'll just work this off. This is a little tricky because this buck is partially frozen. So I'll work this off just to get it kind of out of my way. Ooh, really frozen in there. And just a skinning tip for you guys, like this is really not necessary to be on there. It's a little tricky because this deer's got a little frozen, but you can actually run the belly of your knife towards that flesh and you'll be able to remove that, okay? If you're salting your own hides or something in the field, you're gonna wanna do that now. It's a lot easier now, well, it's partially on the animal versus back at camp. You can see that better there. As long as you have a little looseness to that hide, you're a lot less likely to cut it than people think. People cut it a lot when they have a lot of tension, back tension, and then they cut into the hide that way. If you've got it loose, as you work up and keep your hand away, like tight this way, but not tight from underneath, okay? Not tight from underneath, like this, you're gonna have a lot cleaner hide. A lot easier on your taxidermist, and then like I said, if you're doing stuff in the field, you're gonna be in the backcountry a long time, warm temps, and you gotta salt stuff, makes a lot less work back at camp. In here, be really careful. You're gonna nick a cape. It's usually gonna be down in here. All right, guys, so that shows you the animal caped. Just to save a little battery and video on my phone, I'm gonna pause it, do the other side, and show you how I pull the head off. All right, guys, so I'm just gonna show you an arm lock position that makes breaking these legs off really easy once you've kind of scored the joint. Here, like this. Oh, I can get that last little tendon off. And usually you don't need that much force, but for a frozen joint, you might need to use that grip. All right, guys, so I've got the buck caped on both sides now. And really don't skimp on this before you go to pop that skull off. Get the hide all the way up there behind his ears, and you can feel right here, you'll be able to feel the base of his skull, okay? Don't try to cut that head off until you find that base of the skull, because that's where you want to go into. Find the one joint right there at the base of the skull, pop that, and then you'll be able to twist the skull off, no problem. You'll see a little gap in there, some tendons. That's when you know you're in the right spot. And it's kind of like a ball socket type of connection, so you gotta work your way around the left hand and right hand side. When you're getting the tendons, you'll really feel them loosen up. Okay. Loosen it up real good. Might have to go back in there one more time. When you're doing this, when you get the skull loose, you're gonna have to cut through the trachea and stuff, and be really careful of your cape, because this is another time and that cape can get inadvertently nicked. So what I like to do is get it all out here. Snow makes life easy. Okay. And you see that there's not a lot of effort. I'm not, wrestling with the head for 15 minutes. If you've made the right cuts and you're at the right spot on the spinal column, it'll come off easy just like that. So there's a clean cape of a beautiful deer. All right, guys, so for this axe method, for packing a mule deer where you're just gonna cut it in half and throw it on your mule or pack horse, the first thing you wanna do, well, first realize that you don't need to have it caped. You can do this with the whole hide on the animal. So you can see this is pretty quick, right? But you do have to gut the animal, all right? So if you're gonna gut the animal or whatever, you can use this method. It's not one I use a whole lot, but for me with this frozen animal, it's kind of my only option. But I'll show you the trick to it is first, look inside the cavity and you're gonna see the tenderloins on the back of the animal, right? What I do to know that I'm cutting the animal in the right spot for weight and everything, and to not ruin the tenderloins, I go in right in front of the tenderloins, I go in between that rib, and then I'll slowly bring my knife through there. Okay, right there. Okay, so you can see I've got one of the long ribs there still. I'll clean up this hide just so you guys can see. Alright, so again, go where the tenderloin ends into that rib and come forward. You gotta be really careful with this because you are using the knife towards you, okay? Okay, so now I'm gonna just take my, my axe, my little hammer, I'm gonna go through the spinal column right there, and this is gonna be pretty close to the same weight, this side to this side. You gotta remember that it doesn't look that way, but the hindquarters are a whole lot heavier than your shoulders. All right, guys, so here what I'll do, right here, where that rib breaks, I'll just drive my axe through there. There might be a little bit of stuff still hanging on, but for the most part, you're gonna have it cut right in half to nice pieces. Okay, so the last thing I'm gonna do before I pack it, I'm gonna take off these feet. The trick to taking off these feet is go below that hamstring. It's a sin as a guide, or even just your normal hunter, to cut that hamstring, because then you got nothing to get a hold of. Generally, it's gonna be a little lower than you think. A lot of guys want to cut into the main joint here, go lower than that. Again, if you want, you can use that kind of arm lock / Kimura grip. Legs are done. Just because I know I'm going to use them as I pack, put my handles here, and we're ready to go. Here we are, ready to pack them on, Julie, and ride Steele out of here. All right, guys, so before I pack, I just want to mention something for you guys that are just getting into horseback hunting or hunting with horses and mules. This is a phenomenal mule. To be honest, this mule has probably seen more dead deer and elk than the vast majority of, you know, professional hunters or Insta famous hunters or whatever. I'm sure she's seen it all, plus probably multiples of it, all right? So I wouldn't recommend, if you're just getting into this, to pull your mule up to antlers and meat, a gut pile, that sort of thing, okay? This is very unusual to have an animal like this, and it's from packing hundreds of game animals, okay? So just a warning that you're gonna have to get your animals used to this. You're not just gonna be able to pull them up to all this blood and guts, all right? So I'm gonna go ahead and start packing here. I got her tight. When I do this, I'm going to be really careful because that's a lot of weight on one side of the saddle. If you have a helper, have them hold on to that side of the saddle until you get your other side on. Once I've got both sides on, I can just use my cross strap. These are our meat painters. All they have is a cross strap. But again, it helps have a partner. Help you get them a lot tighter. Okay, so at this point you're pretty safe. You've got even weight on both sides. I'm out of breath. But anyways, I'll go ahead. I'm gonna turn her. All right, guys, so I got my cape and antlers. Got my lash rope. So what I'm gonna do, and this is, you gotta be really careful, particularly with new mules. I'm gonna roll that cape up, put it on the top here. I'm gonna take these antlers and set them down on my buck like that, okay? I'm gonna find a good spot for that head. I'm gonna be really careful that any of these points, particularly on non-typical deer and elk, make sure those points, you know, while you're riding, a lot of movement, you don't get those points down in your saddle or, God forbid, your actual horse's flesh, because after a long ride, it's gonna wear a hole in your horse, and that's bad practice. So be really careful about that. A lot of times what you can do, you can get a large diameter stick, preferably a little bit larger than this. And you can put them in between here so it comes down on your buck. And when you lash, you can lash them down onto your buck, and that stick's gonna hold it off your actual animal. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and do a box hitch. So my cinch is gonna go over here. Throw my rope across. You got a partner, it's a lot easier. Yeah, I like to catch on these deer. I like to catch the horns like that, really lock them down. Okay, again, make sure I've got no contact with the mule and no possibility of it. And I'll watch that while I'm on the trail also. Okay, that other box hitch is pretty ugly. Not the prettiest box hitch in Colorado, but sometimes with antlers and stuff, that's how it goes. So here, got the box hitch. Just gonna take this, I'm just gonna lift it a little bit off Julie so pannier's not rubbing on her. So go up here and finish up with the packer's knot. Okay. I'll tuck this. It's a little bit long to be down here, so I'll go around that neck and tuck it back underneath itself. I'll kind of just try the load. It's pretty solid. Again, I'll check those tines. There's no way they're gonna touch her. Okay. And we're good to go. All right, so I'll show you the scene before we leave. Okay, there's Julie all packed up. Steel's ready to rock. And we're headed down the trail. All right, headed home. There's Julie with our buck. There's Steel leading the way. All right, Steel, last turn into the ranch, buddy. What do you think, Julie? Unloaded into the meat shed. All right, home sweet home in the meat shed. Made it.